The sun was falling low on the broken world. Its light touched the ruins of a marketplace that once had life and laughter. Now it was silent. Only wind moved through empty stalls and shattered buildings. Old signs hung broken, doors swung in. The breeze and dust filled the air. The land looked dead, but in the silence something waited. A lone human traveler walked slowly between the wrecked cars and fallen stones. His boots pressed against broken glass and dry earth. His clothes were torn from many days of walking, and his face carried marks of hunger and pain. He had crossed many dead towns like this, searching only for a safe path through enemy territory. He did not expect to find anyone alive here. Then he heard it, a voice so weak, so desperate, it cut through the silence like a knife. It was not the sound of anger or command, but a cry, trembling with fear and sadness. "Just milk for my sister, please," the voice whispered. The man froze, his heart beating faster. He turned his head, eyes scanning the ruins. Behind a broken fountain he saw movement. A thin figure, small and shaking, came into view. It was a girl, her skin pale blue, her long hair tangled with dust. She clutched something close to her chest, a smaller form hidden in a torn cloth. The human stared, unsure if this was a trick. He knew many alien races who hated his kind, but this child did not look dangerous. She looked broken, fragile, almost invisible against the ruins. Her eyes lifted, large and filled with fear, yet burning with a desperate hope. Again her voice came, softer this time. "Please, just milk." The man stepped closer, his boots crunching the dry stones. The girl pulled her sister tighter into her arms, her thin fingers shaking. The little one was even smaller, her skin darker blue, lips dry, her breath shallow and weak. It was clear she had not eaten for days. The human felt his throat tighten. For a moment he thought of walking away. These were not his people, not his problem. But he saw the way the elder girl pressed her cheek against her sister's forehead. She was no warrior, no enemy, just a sister begging for a chance. The man's heart ached. He reached into his bag and took out a flask of water. He held it out, but the girl shook her head. "No, she needs milk," she said, her voice breaking. Her eyes glistened as if she knew how strange her request sounded. But she spoke with a truth that left no room for doubt. The man crouched down, his shadow falling over them. He looked at the younger sister, at her weak chest rising and falling. He remembered the faces of the children he once knew, back when the war had not yet taken everything. He remembered promises he could not keep, and in that moment, something inside him shifted. He asked her, "Where are your parents?" Her lips trembled, her head shook slowly. "They are gone," she whispered, her eyes falling to the ground. Her voice was like a thread ready to break. Only the sound of the wind answered after her words. The man looked around the empty streets. He felt the weight of the silence pressing against him. The ruins gave no hope, only shadows and ghosts. Yet here was life, fragile and weak, asking him for something simple, milk. The man's mind argued with his heart. If he stayed, if he tried to help, it could cost him his life. Supplies were rare. Guards and soldiers hunted every stranger. Why should he risk himself for children of another world? But then the younger girl coughed, a soft broken sound, and the elder sister's arms tightened around her as tears filled her eyes. The man felt his chest burn with a pain he thought he had buried long ago. He could not turn his back, not this time. He took a deep breath, the dust of the ruins filling his lungs, and then he said quietly, "I will find it." The alien girl looked up, hope flashing in her tired eyes. You will help," she whispered, as if afraid her ears had tricked her. The man nodded slowly. "I don't know how, but I will," he answered. His voice was steady, but inside him rose a storm of fear and doubt. The girl pressed her forehead against her sister's, whispering words in her own alien tongue. Her small shoulders shook with silent cries. The man stood, tightening the strap of his bag. The ruins stretched before him, filled with danger, filled with death, but he had made a promise. As the last light of the sun touched the broken land, the man walked forward into the shadows, behind him. The girl clutched her sister tightly, her lips moving in prayer. The ruins were silent again, but a new story had begun. The ruins grew darker as the sun slipped behind the mountains. Shadows stretched long across broken cars and cracked streets. The human traveler stood at the edge of the marketplace, his hand resting against the wall of a shattered building. His promise echoed in his mind, "I will find it." But now that the words were spoken, the weight of them pressed heavy on his chest. He had made many choices in his life, some for survival, some for duty, but this was different. Milk for Anne. Alien child, such a simple thing, yet impossible in a land where even water was scarce. He closed his eyes, trying to push away the thought that he might have doomed himself. Still, when he opened them again, he saw the image of the girl's face, pale and trembling, and her sister's weak breath. He turned back once, watching the two figures in the ruins. The elder girl rocked her little sister in her arms, whispering words he did not understand. Her body swayed gently, as if holding her was the only way to keep her alive. The man clenched his fists, torn between walking away and keeping his promise. If he left now, no one would ever know. No one would judge, but his own soul would not forgive. The streets were dangerous. He knew that well. Alien patrols passed often. Scavengers lurked in the alleys, and hunger made every shadow a threat. The human reached for the knife at his belt, touching it as if to remind himself he was still armed, still alive. He checked the small bag on his back. A few crumbs of bread, a flask of water, nothing more, not enough for himself. And yet he had given part of it away. He thought of the war. He thought of the days when humans and aliens stood against each other. The screams, the fire, the endless nights when both sides spilled blood. He had lost friends, brothers, family, to alien hands. Now, fate placed two alien children in front of him and asked for mercy. His mind screamed, "Why should I help them? They are not my people. They are not my blood." But his heart answered with another voice, quieter yet stronger, "Because no one else will." And that voice was enough to push him forward. He left the fountain behind and moved deeper into the ruins. His steps were slow, careful, each sound watched by unseen ears. Buildings stood like broken teeth, jagged and black against the fading sky. Windows stared down empty, like eyes that had seen too much death. He passed a burned shop, its sign melted into twisted metal. The smell of ash still hung in the air, though the fire had long gone. He searched the shelves, overturned boxes, anything that might hold what he needed. Dust rose in clouds as he pulled open drawers. Cans rolled across the floor, but none held milk. Old bottles shattered under his boots, and rats scattered into the darkness. Each second wasted was another second. The small alien girl might not survive. His chest tightened, his throat dry. He remembered the younger one's face, so still, so fragile. He shook his head, whispering to himself, "Not yet. She must not die yet." The words kept him moving. A small fire against the cold of despair. Outside, the night deepened. The stars appeared faint above the smoke-filled sky, and then he saw them shapes moving in the distance. Alien patrol. Armored and armed, their weapons glowing faint in the dark. He ducked into an alley, pressing his back against the wall. His breath slowed, his heart beat hard in his chest. The soldiers walked past, their voices sharp and strange. He understood only a few words, but the tone was clear. They were searching. He dared not move until their shadows faded. When they were gone, he slipped out again, his body tense, his hand never leaving the knife. Every step he took pulled him deeper into danger. Every corner held the chance of death. But every moment also pulled him closer to keeping his promise. He stopped at a broken shop that once sold food. Shelves lay scattered, doors broken. Yet in the corner stood a sealed metal crate. His hands worked quickly, prying it open with his blade. Inside were packets of dried powder. His eyes lit with brief hope, but when he read the label, his heart sank. The powder was toxic for alien blood. He had seen it before. If he gave this to the child, it would kill her faster than hunger. He cursed under his breath, his voice raw with anger and frustration. The ruins gave him nothing, only reminders of how fragile hope could be. Still, he would not stop. He closed the crate, stepped out, and raised his eyes to the stars. His heart whispered to him that somewhere, somehow, the milk he sought still waited. He thought again of the alien girl's voice, soft yet strong in its need. "Just milk for my sister, please." The words burned in his memory, pushing away fear and hate. He tightened his fists and turned toward the darker part of the city, where danger was greatest, but where supplies might still be found. Behind him, far away at the fountain, two alien sisters waited in silence, one fading with every breath, the other clinging to hope given by a stranger. And the man, walking into the night, felt the weight of both their lives pressing upon him. It was no longer about humans or aliens, war or revenge. It was about a promise and the choice to keep it. The night wrapped the ruins in cold silence. The human walked carefully through broken streets, his eyes sharp for danger. Every sound seemed louder in the dark. The echo of his boots, the rustle of paper in the wind, the distant cry of scavenger, birds circling above. But louder than all of that was the echo of her words inside his mind. "Just milk for my sister, please." He paused beside a fallen statue, its head cracked on the ground, its stone face staring blankly at the stars. His hand pressed against his chest, as if he could steady his racing heart. He whispered to himself, "I promised," and the word felt heavy, but also alive. It was not the kind of promise one makes and forgets. It was one that burned inside like fire. As he searched, his mind returned to the two sisters waiting for him. The elder girl, thin and tired, yet standing firm to protect her sister, her hands shaking but never letting go. And the younger one, small and fragile, her breaths shallow, each one a battle she might lose. The image of their faces gave him strength. He pushed into another ruined building, its roof half collapsed. Dust fell as he stepped over the rubble. The shelves inside were empty, only scraps left behind by others who had come before. He picked up a small tin, but it was filled with mold. He dropped it, the sound echoing like a bell in the emptiness. The human leaned against the wall, his breath slow, his thoughts wandered to his past, the faces of his own people. He remembered when his younger brother had once cried out for food. He remembered the day he could not find it in time. The memory stabbed him, and he clenched his teeth, whispering, "Not again." He stepped back into the night, the moon casting silver light over the ruins. A cold wind blew across the empty streets, carrying the smell of ash and smoke. He looked to the sky, the stars faint and hidden behind clouds. It felt as if even the heavens had abandoned this land. But still, he walked, for his promise would not let him stop. Soon he came to a crossing, 3 paths ahead. One lead deeper into the city, where alien patrols were heavy. One lead toward the forests beyond, where scavengers ruled. The last was a narrow alley, dark and silent. He chose the alley, for it gave him shadow and silence, even if it hid dangers. Inside the alley, he heard movement. A figure crawled from behind a broken cart. It was another alien, older, his face scarred, his eyes dim with hunger. The old alien looked at the human, and then at the knife on his belt. But instead of attacking, he held out a shaking hand and whispered for food. The human froze, his heart torn again. He had almost nothing, and what little he had was already promised. Still, he gave the old alien a piece of bread. The alien's eyes filled with tears as he ate, whispering words the man could not understand. Then the old alien pointed toward the north, and with a weak voice said, "Storehouse." Guarded, the human's chest tightened. A storehouse meant supplies, maybe even milk, but also danger. He bowed his head slightly in thanks. though the alien was already sinking back into the shadows. The man tightened his bag and turned north. His steps grew quicker, his purpose sharper. Hours passed as he moved through the broken streets. At last he saw it, a large building still standing strong, while all others had fallen. Its walls were cracked, but guarded by armed soldiers. There, weapons glowing faint in the dark, the man crouched, low behind the remains of a wall, his eyes fixed on the storehouse. This was it, the place that might hold the life of the alien child. Fear pressed against him, whispering that he could never succeed, that he would be caught, that he would die, that his promise was already broken. But then he thought of the little one's chest rising weakly, of the elder girl's voice begging for help, and his fear turned to fire. "I will keep it," he whispered. "I will keep my promise." He stayed hidden until the guards changed, watching their steps, learning their pattern. He waited for the moment when their eyes turned away. The night grew colder, but he did not move until the time was right. Finally, when silence filled the air, he crawled closer, every muscle tense. The storehouse loomed over him like a beast, ready to swallow him whole. As he pressed himself against the wall, he felt the weight of choice heavier than ever. He could walk away and live, or he could risk death to save two small lives that were not even his kind. His heart thundered, his breath came slow, and then he whispered the word again, "Promise." The human closed his eyes for a brief moment. He pictured the girl's eyes, tired, but still shining with hope. He pictured the little sister's fragile face, fighting for breath, and in that darkness, he felt the strength to move, not for glory, not for reward, but for a promise that gave him purpose. The night stretched before him, filled with danger. The guards moved in patterns, the shadows danced with each flicker of light, and the man, pressing his back to the wall, prepared himself for what was to come. His knife was ready, his mind was steady, his heart was burning. Whatever waited inside that storehouse, he would face it. For the first time in many years, the man felt alive, not because of survival, not because of hatred, but because of hope. The kind of hope born from keeping a promise. And as he slipped closer to the entrance, the ruins seemed to hold their breath, a single man against the night, carrying the weight of two small lives. The night air was heavy with silence. The human crouched low against the wall of the alien storehouse, his eyes sharp as he studied the guards. They stood tall in armor, their weapons glowing faintly with blue light, their movements strict and trained. Every few minutes they turned, scanning the ruins, as if expecting danger. But danger was already waiting. Pressed against their very walls, the human's heart pounded in his chest, yet his hands stayed steady. He had hunted before, in forests and cities, but never for something like this. He was not searching for gold or weapons, but for milk, the one thing that might save a dying child. The thought made him feel strange, as if he were foolish, yet also alive with purpose. For once, he was not fighting to destroy, but to protect. He watched their steps, memorizing their pattern. One guard moved left, another circled right. Then both met again at the gate before partying once more. He counted their timing. Every second a chance and a risk. When the moment came, he slipped from shadow to shadow, his breath low, his body pressed to the broken walls that hid him. At the back of the storehouse, he found a smaller door, half buried in rubble. The metal lock was old, rust biting into it. He pulled his knife and pressed it against the latch. The sound of metal against metal rang too loud in his ears. But the guards did not come, and the lock finally gave way. He slipped inside, his body tense, his ears wide open for sound. The air inside was cold, carrying the smell of chemicals and dust. Rows of crates stretched before him, stacked high like towers. Some were marked with alien symbols, others sealed with strange locks. He moved quietly, running his hand along the edges, searching for what he needed. A small light flickered in the corner of the hall. It was weak, powered by some dying machine, but enough to guide him. He crouched and opened one crate after another. Inside, he found grains, dried roots, and strange powders wrapped in alien cloth. But none of it was milk. None of it could save the child. His breath grew faster, his frustration heavier. He whispered to himself, "It has to be here." As if the walls themselves might answer. Each crate he opened took more of his strength, more of his hope, but still he pushed on. Because to stop now meant breaking his promise. And breaking his promise was worse than death. Finally, in the deepest row, he found a crate colder than the rest, its surface frosted, its lock stronger. He forced his knife under the seal and pushed. The lid creaked open, and a cold mist rose into the air. Inside, sealed in glass containers, was what he sought, pale liquid, real milk. For a moment, he could not move, his chest filled with relief so sharp it almost felt like pain. He reached out and touched the container, his hands trembling. It was heavy, but his strength grew with hope. Here it was, the life of the alien child. The proof that promises could be kept, but hope was never free. A sound broke the silence, the slam of a door, the sharp cry of alien voices. The guards had noticed the broken lock. Their footsteps thundered through the hall as they shouted to each other. The human froze, clutching the milk to his chest. He had to decide, hide or run. He pressed himself behind the crate, his breath shallow. The guards entered, their glowing weapons casting blue light across the room. They split apart, searching the aisles, their voices cold and sharp. One of them passed so close the human could hear his breath. The man stayed still, every muscle screaming to move. The milk pressed against his chest, the promise burning inside him. If he was caught now, both his life and the girl's hope would end. He waited, counting heartbeats as if they were seconds of life. And then, by chance or fate, the guard turned away. The human seized his moment. He moved like shadow, slipping through the aisle. His boots made no sound, his body low and fast. The door back to the ruins stood open, the night calling to him. He ran, the milk heavy in his arms. A shout split the silence. The guards had seen him. Bolts of blue light cut through the air, burning into walls and stone. He leaped over rubble, his body twisting as the shots came close. The ground shook as one blast struck the wall beside him, spraying dust. Still he ran, for the promise was stronger than fear. He burst into the night, the ruins stretching before him. Behind him, the guards shouted, chasing with heavy steps. His lungs burned, his legs felt weak, but he did not stop. Every corner of the city seemed to rise against him, every shadow hiding danger, but his grip on the milk never loosened. At last, he ducked into a narrow street. The dark swallowed him, the shouts fading behind. He pressed against a wall, gasping for breath. The milk was still safe, pressed against his chest. His heart thundered with both fear and triumph. He had hunted, and he had found, but the hunt was not over yet, for now came the hardest part. To carry his prize through the ruins, through the dangers, back to the two alien sisters waiting with fading hope. He closed his eyes, whispering again, promise. And then he stepped into the darkness once more. The ruins seemed endless. As the human pressed forward, his body ached. His shoulder burned from where the sharp stones had cut him during the escape. But he clutched the container of milk tightly, never letting it slip from his grasp. Each step he took was heavier, but each step also carried the weight of his promise. The night sky stretched wide above him, and the broken city whispered with unseen dangers. Behind him the guards' voices still echoed faintly. They searched the streets, their weapons glowing in the dark. The human knew they would not stop until they found him. The storehouse was too important, and theft too bold to be forgiven. Yet he walked on, for turning back was death, and stopping meant breaking his word. He paused in the shadow of a half-broken tower. The milk pressed cold against his chest, reminding him why he fought. He thought of the girl waiting by the fountain, her thin arms wrapped around her sister. He thought of the little one's shallow breathing, the way her lips trembled with every weak cough, and his heart told him he could not fail, no matter the cost. Still, fear gnawed at him like teeth. He had chosen this path. But what if the choice brought only death? He asked himself again and again. Why risk my life for alien children? They were not his kind, not his blood, not his people. But when he closed his eyes, he saw his younger brother's face, pale and hungry, and he knew the answer. He walked toward the heart of the ruins, but soon he realized he had made a mistake. The narrow path ended in a clearing filled with broken walls, and standing within the clearing were soldiers, their eyes catching him in the glow of their weapons. The human froze, his breath sharp, his grip on the milk tighter than ever. The soldiers shouted in their alien tongue, raising their weapons as they moved closer. His choices narrowed to two: fight and die, or run and maybe live. But if he ran, he risked losing the milk, risked failing the two fragile lives waiting in the shadows. His promise weighed against his survival, and in that moment, he understood. The promise meant more. He crouched low, his knife gleaming faintly in the dim light. His eyes darted left and right, searching for a gap, a shadow, a weakness in their circle. The soldiers spread, their boots thundering against the broken stones. One shouted a command, another raised a glowing rifle. The air buzzed as the first shot tore past his head, striking the wall behind him. The human ran, not away, but toward the smallest gap in their line. He crashed through rubble, his body moving fast despite the pain. The soldiers shouted, bolts of blue light chasing his every step, but his promise burned hotter than fear, and his legs carried him forward. He slid behind a fallen column, his breath ragged. The soldiers closed in, their voices sharp and furious. He gripped the milk tight in one hand, his knife in the other. His mind raced. He could not fight them all, not alone, but he could outthink them. He waited, crouched in silence. When one soldier came too close, the human sprang forward, striking with desperate strength. The knife cut through the alien's armor at the joint, and the guard fell with a cry. The human seized the chance, pushing past into the open street. The others shouted, their chase growing wilder. He ran again, his body screaming, his blood hot. Every breath tore at his chest. Every step sent fire through his muscles. But he did not stop. For in his arms he carried more than milk. He carried a promise, and promises must be kept. At last he stumbled into an abandoned building. He pressed his back against the wall, his chest rising and falling like a storm. Through the cracks in the stone, he watched the soldiers move past, searching. He held his breath until their footsteps faded. Only then did he sink to the ground, his body weak but his spirit unbroken. He looked at the container of milk in his hands. It seemed so small, so simple, yet it had become more valuable than gold. It was hope, fragile but alive. He whispered softly, I made my choice. And in that moment, he knew he had chosen rightly. The night was not over, the danger not gone, but the human felt a strange calm inside him, for he had given himself to something greater than fear. He had chosen to risk everything, not for himself, but for the two small lives waiting. And that choice gave him strength enough to rise again. He tightened his grip on the milk, pulled his bag across his shoulder, and stepped back into the street. The ruins loomed dark and dangerous, but his path was clear. He would return to the fountain, to the sisters, no matter what stood in his way, for his choice was made, his promise unbroken, and nothing in the night would stop him. The night had grown colder. The ruins lay silent except for the distant cries of crows circling above. The human moved carefully through the broken streets, the container of milk pressed tightly against his chest. Every step felt heavier, every breath sharper, yet his grip never loosened. He had risked too much, lost too much, to turn back now. The sisters were waiting, he knew. The elder girl holding her younger sister close, watching the darkness with desperate hope. Time was running out for them, and every moment he delayed might mean the little ones. Last breath, he pushed himself harder, though his body screamed with exhaustion. He whispered again and again, I promised, as if the words could keep him alive. but danger still hunted him. From behind came the faint sound of boots striking stone. The soldiers had not given up their search, and now their voices echoed through the ruins like thunder. The human pressed himself against a wall, his breath held tight. He could see their glowing weapons cutting through the shadows as they drew closer. There was no escape. If he stayed, he had to run. He tightened the strap of his bag, shifted the milk carefully under his arm, and broke into a sprint. The night exploded with shouts as the soldiers saw him. Blue bolts of fire burst through the air, striking walls, burning holes in the stone around him. He darted through an alley, leaping over rubble. His body moved with desperate speed, yet one shot grazed his shoulder. Searing pain flooding through him, he staggered but did not fall. His teeth clenched against the fire in his flesh. Blood ran hot down his arm, but his grip on the milk never faltered. The promise burned brighter than the pain. The soldiers were fast, their footsteps pounding behind him, their voices sharp, their anger fierce. He turned a corner, his boots slipping on the broken stones, nearly crashing to the ground. Ahead lay a wide street, open and empty, dangerous but unavoidable. He had no choice but to cross it. As he dashed into the open, the night lit with fire. Dozens of shots rained down, tearing into the ruins around him. One blast struck the ground at his feet, throwing him off balance. He fell hard, the milk rolling from his hands across the dirt. Panic shot through him as he scrambled forward, grabbing it before it could shatter. The soldiers closed in, their shadows stretching across the street. The human clutched the milk close, his chest heaving. He could not outrun them much longer. He had to choose, fight and surely die, or keep running and risk being cut down. He pressed his forehead against the cold container, whispering, "For them," summoning every last ounce of strength. He rose again. He dashed into a ruined house, crashing through the broken door. The walls shook as the soldiers followed, their weapons blasting holes through the stone. Dust filled the air, choking his lungs, blinding his eyes. But still, he ran, weaving through rooms, stumbling over shattered furniture. At the back of the house, a window hung broken. He leaped through it, glass cutting his arms as he rolled into the dirt outside. His body burned with pain, blood dripping from fresh wounds. But he stood again, clutching the milk. The chase roared on behind him. The ruins became a maze. He turned corner after corner, his legs heavy, his lungs fire, yet he kept moving. Driven by something greater than life itself, he could hear the sisters' voices in his mind, soft and pleading, and he knew he could not let them fade into silence. Another shot tore through the night, striking him in the side. He fell hard against the wall, his vision spinning. Pain crushed him, stealing his breath. The milk slipped from his fingers, rolling across the dirt once more. With trembling hands he dragged himself forward, reaching for it. His blood marked the stones beneath him. His strength was nearly gone. But when his fingers closed around the container again, a weak smile touched his lips. He pulled it close, holding it as if it were life itself, for it was not his own, but theirs. The soldiers' voices grew louder, their steps closing in. The human knew he would not escape this time. His body was too weak, his wounds too deep. But the fountain was not far. He could almost feel the path in his bones. If only he could make it a little further. He forced himself to rise, leaning against the wall for support. Every movement sent fire through his veins. His vision blurred, the world spinning around him, yet he walked, step after step, carrying the milk. He whispered, "Just a little more." Behind him the soldiers shouted, raising their weapons for the final strike. The human staggered forward, his breath ragged. Every step left blood behind him, but every step also carried hope forward. The fountain waited in the darkness, the sisters waiting with it, and he knew his life was the price for theirs. At last, as his body gave way, he fell to his knees, the milk still clutched tightly in his hands. He could hear the faint cries of the soldiers, the hum of their weapons, ready to end him. But above it all, in his heart, he heard the voice of the girl once more. "Just milk for my sister. please." And with his last strength, he smiled, whispering, "Promise kept." The fountain stood silent under the pale moonlight. Its broken stones glowed faintly in the silver beams. The elder alien girl sat there, her sister still cradled in her arms, her eyes heavy with tears, her lips whispering quiet prayers to the night. The child's breathing was shallow, soft gasps that sounded weaker with every passing moment. Her heart pounded with fear. Every shadow made her flinch. Every silence made her think the promise was broken. She told herself, again and again, that the strange human would return. But doubt crept into her chest like ice. Perhaps he had already been caught. Perhaps he had chosen life over strangers. Then, from the dark street, she heard it. Not the sharp boots of soldiers, not the cold voices of enemies, but the sound of stumbling steps, uneven and heavy. She lifted her head, her eyes wide, and there he was, the human, broken and bloodied, carrying the milk. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run to him, but her sister's fragile weight held her in place. He staggered closer, every step leaving drops of blood on the stones, yet his arms never let go of the container. His eyes locked onto her, filled with pain but also with something greater relief. At last he fell to his knees before her, the milk clutched tightly in his shaking hands. With trembling strength, he pushed it toward her. "Take it," he whispered, his voice cracked. "Save her." The girl's hands shook as she took the container. Her tears fell like rain as she poured the milk into a small cup she carried. She lifted it to her sister's lips, whispering softly, begging her to drink. The child's mouth opened weakly, her small tongue tasting the liquid, and slowly, so slowly, she swallowed. The girl's heart leaped with hope. She gave her more, drop by drop, and color began to return to her sister's lips. Her chest rose a little stronger. Her tiny fingers twitched with life. The elder girl cried out with joy, pressing her forehead against her sister's, whispering, "You will live." She turned back to the human, her eyes wide with gratitude and sorrow. "You saved her," she whispered, her voice breaking. But the man only smiled weakly. His body leaned against the fountain, his wounds bleeding freely into the stones. The girl reached for him, trying to press cloth against his shoulder, his side, anywhere the blood flowed, but his hand stopped hers, gentle yet firm. "No," he said softly, "keep it for her." His eyes drifted to the little sister, now breathing steadier. A faint smile crossed his lips. "That's enough." The elder girl shook her head, her tears falling harder. "No, please, you cannot leave us," she begged. But the man's strength was fading, his eyes dimming like the last light of a dying fire. He had carried his promise to the end, and now the end had come. Still, his face held peace. He whispered again, "Promise kept," and then his eyes closed slowly. The night wrapped around him, carrying his breath away. The fountain stood silent once more, but the sisters were no longer alone. The elder girl clutched her sister close, her tears falling onto the man's still hand. Her heart ached with sorrow, but also burned with gratitude. She whispered words in her alien tongue, a prayer not only for her sister's life, but also for the human who had given his own. Her small voice trembled but grew strong with each word. She vowed never to forget, never to let his sacrifice be lost in silence. As the moon climbed higher, the little sister stirred. Her eyes blinked open, weak but alive. She looked up at her elder sister, then at the human lying beside the fountain. She did not understand, but she felt the weight of the moment, and her small hand reached out, resting on the man's arm, as if to say thank you. The night stretched long, but the sisters remained by his side. They did not move, they did not flee, for though the ruins were dangerous, this place was sacred now. It was the place where a promise was kept, where a stranger became more than an enemy. He became family. When dawn broke, the ruins lit with golden light. Birds circled the skies, and the silence of the night gave way to the sounds of morning. The sisters stood, their faces pale but their spirits stronger. The elder girl carried her sister, and together they looked down at the man one last time. They whispered farewell, their voices trembling. Then they walked into the rising sun, carrying the gift he had given them, life. Every step they took was guided by his sacrifice. Every breath the younger sister took was proof of his courage. And though the world had forgotten kindness, they would remember forever.